Brandon Swanson, Marshall, Minnesota. Brandon Swanson was 19 years old when he went out with some friends in his town of Marshall. They were celebrating the end of their second semester in college. This was in May of 2008. He'd been attending school at the Minnesota West Community and Technical College. His friends all admit that he'd had a few drinks that night, but he didn't appear to be intoxicated, and he hadn't been drinking an extreme amount. Unfortunately, he probably was impaired, as he would find himself driving off the road into a ditch. Around 2 a.m., he placed a call to his parents saying he's okay, but he's in a ditch and he needs help getting out. There was no way his car was driving out on its own. He would explain to them where he believed he was at, and his parents would drive to that location, but they didn't see him at all. They asked him to flash his lights so that they could locate the car, and he did, but they didn't see the lights. So they clearly were not in the right location. But they stayed on the phone with him that whole time. They decided they would just keep talking until they found him. And because he was pretty sure where he was at, and he said he could see the town lights of the city of Lind, he decided with his parents that they would just pick him up at a bar there that they were aware of on the edge of town after he just walked there. But again, for safety reasons, they were going to stay on the phone with him, and they did for the next 47 minutes. They were speaking to him when they heard him mutter some sort of expletive and say, "Another downed fence." He did sort of scream out, and then it was silent. It doesn't appear there were any people around where he was at. His parents, in a panic, would call him again and again, but there was no answer. And there were lakes and streams around in the area he was at, so there was some concern that he had gone into the water somewhere. At 6:30 a.m., his panicked parents tried to report him to the police. They knew something bad had happened to him. They could hear it on the phone in his voice, and they needed help to find him. What happened next, though, sadly, has happened many times in the stories that we've covered here. Not only did the police refuse to look for him, they refused to even take a report at all. They would tell his parents that he's an adult, and it's common for adults that age to stay out late and go missing, and he has every right to do so. But if you want my opinion, I believe that it's the epitome of laziness. This didn't have to end that way at that moment. Maybe it was too late for Brandon, and maybe it wasn't. His parents knew something was wrong, and the police refused to help, so then what do? Well, they chose to go to the sheriff, as this was the local police department first, and the sheriff listened. The sheriff was able to even obtain his cell phone records to see where his calls were pinging off of. And it would turn out he wasn't near the town he thought he was near. They were looking in all the wrong places. In the afternoon of May 14th, 2008, Brandon's car was located in the ditch on the Lincoln Lyon Road near Taunton, Minnesota. This was about 19 miles or 36 kilometers away from where he believed he was when he went off the road. Although he must have been walking off of the road when he went looking for them, probably from the ditch he ended up in. His parents would believe he was confused and wandering around in the dark. Authorities originally believed he may have fallen into the Yellow Medicine River, but they would later concentrate looking for him near a place called Mud Creek, which is a few miles northwest of Porter. And there were some questions as to whether he disappeared on purpose or not, but there was no indication he wanted to hurt himself in any way, and the fact that he called his parents and he truly went off the road, he didn't leave with his car, it just seems incredibly unlikely that it was on purpose. So if it's an accident and he's no longer alive, his parents at least need to find his remains. For right now, they're just sort of living in limbo. Brandon was 5'6" or 168 centimeters tall. He had brown hair and blue eyes. Brandon's law was signed into effect in July of 2009. While they couldn't find Brandon, his parents wanted to make a difference for other people like Brandon. So while it was too late for Brandon, the police are no longer allowed to refuse to take a missing person report for someone under the age of 21. And this is a big deal. This should happen in every state, if you ask me. In California, I worked with a family whose son was 11 and went missing. The police didn't look for him, or at least they say that they didn't. And a policeman made a comment to her that he'd be back when he was hungry. Well, this was 1988. I'm sure he got hungry at some point, and they still don't know what happened to him. And because they didn't look in that case for 4 months, any clue as to what happened was gone. Even when it's not the answer you want, people need answers. They need to know what happened to their children. In Brandon's case, his photo's been age progressed, as you can see here. Brandon Swanson has been missing for 19 years. If Brandon's still alive, he would be 34 years old today. Kathy Wilcox from Otsego, Michigan. This young lady was living with her father and her stepmother. It was here in 1972 that Kathy would find herself in a fight with her family. Her sister would later say that there was an argument and a slap across the face that was placed there by her stepmother. But the fight itself wasn't the stepmother against the child. Her father was mad too. Her sister would explain that this anger stemmed from Kathy dating an 18-year-old man who at that time was 2.5 years older than she was, and obviously an adult. Her biological father was just as angry as the stepmother. They felt the man was too old for her, and they were not okay with her seeing him. Kathy found herself angry and stomping out of the house after the slap, saying that she will never speak to her family again. And sadly, she didn't. But their belief as to why this happened has changed over time. The police didn't pay a lot of attention to this case at all, saying she'd be back. While of course she did storm out of her West Franklin Street home, she only took the clothing she was wearing at the time. She didn't even pack a bag. She was just angry and walked out. Something kids her age do all the time. I did it. I'm sure others too. So personally, I think it's highly unlikely that she chose what happened, but what did happen. No one really knows. Her sister believes that someone in town knows what happened. From what was said, it seems that her sister, Karen, has a suspect in mind that she refers to as a significant antisocial person, saying that person was in their life at the time. But that person's name was never released. They have age progressed the photo seen here to the age of 46. When Kathy went missing, she was 5'3" or 160 centimeters tall. She had brown hair and blue eyes. And as I mentioned before, she came from a small town where everybody knew everybody else. So it does make it more likely that somebody knows something. Her family just needs to know what happened, and they desperately need someone to come forward and provide anonymous tips. Kathy Wilcox has been missing for 51 years. If she's still alive, she would be 66 years old today. Charlotte Jean Loomis, Eatontown, New Jersey. Charlotte Loomis was a young woman who had been staying with her sister-in-law, and that sister-in-law was stationed at Fort Monmouth, which is a base that is no longer open. It's not clear how she was supposed to get to the airport, but she had a flight out from Eatontown, New Jersey on September 1st, 1972, and she was supposed to fly back to her home at Midland Bay City at the Saginaw International Airport in Michigan. It's not hard to imagine that flying was a bit scary, but the plan was for her to fly alone that day. And the crazy thing about this is we know for a fact that she made it to the airport, or at least her luggage did. Her luggage was checked in and made the flight, but she did not. And of course, this was before surveillance video. So nobody knows if Charlotte took her luggage there and disappeared from the airport, or perhaps the luggage was meant as a misdirection. Either way, her luggage arrived and she did not. She had blonde hair, blue eyes, and a scar on her forehead. She had previously fractured her forearm and was 5'2" tall, or 158 centimeters. And generally, someone of that age probably doesn't grow after that. The image that you see here has been age progressed to the age of 54. Charlotte Loomis has been missing for 51 years. If she's still alive, she would be 66 years old today. Huge thanks for watching all the way to the end, and a big thanks to all of you who consistently like and comment on the videos. The whole dance with YouTube is hard sometimes. Whether you leave a full comment or an emoji, it makes a huge difference. It's a huge push toward the videos being suggested to new people. The next goal is 20,000. Thanks everyone for watching. Take care of yourselves and each other.